Welcome to The Practical Animal. We speak directly to wildlife professionals. If professional success for you means working with wildlife, subscribe as we go around the world interviewing people about what it takes to be an animaler. I'm John Beaumont, and thanks for joining me and for your continued interest in the programme. Hello and welcome to episode 234. For this episode, and for the first time, I have a panel of 3 experts who will talk to me about a particular case study involving the treatment, rehabilitation and release of a young swallow-tailed kite in Louisiana. It is a model for what can be achieved when multiple professionals come together in collaboration. A veterinarian, a rehabilitator, and a raptor biologist talk together about the hard and soft skills needed to rehabilitate a swallow-tailed kite. If you are a student of English as a foreign language, this video will be good for you because you will hear 2 accents, American and British. Rehabilitating swallow-tailed kites and living the wildlife looks like this.
The Louisiana State University.
Letitia?
My name is Letitia Labbie, and I'm a wildlife rehabilitator that specializes in bird of prey in Youngsville, Louisiana.
And Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Coulson. I'm the president of the Orleans Audubon Society, and I'm also a raptor researcher studying swallow-tailed kites in particular.
Fantastic, fantastic. Folks, we're here to talk about this very special case study with this swallow-tailed kite that you were all involved with. Mike, can you start, please? Because you were involved first, weren't you?
Yes, we had the bird presented to us on May 31st. It was a nestling that was found down. It had ectoparasites. It was dehydrated. And so we went ahead and started to provide supportive care for that bird and got it basically back to eating so that we could transfer it to Letitia for some follow-up rehabilitation.
What was the sort of first protocol involved, Mike? What was the first thing you had to do with the kite?
Well, with any of the birds that we get in, we actually, because of highly pathogenic avian influenza, we pre-screen all birds at this point for that. And then we do a physical exam. And at our wildlife hospital, because we're tied to the veterinary school, it's an opportunity for veterinary students in their clinical year training to get involved with this. And so we do these exams with these students to help assess basically where these patients are and what their particular needs are.
Thank you. Letitia, what was your role? You received it from the vet, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So I have a rehab center over here in Youngsville, and it's basically just me with the birds. But when LSU has a bunch of babies that come in and they've gotten them past the illnesses that they might have, broken wings and things like that, they come over. Some of them come over to me. I'm usually able to house more than one bird, more than one baby at a time. And my goal is then to get them up to a subadult stage where they can eventually be released back into the wild. So I've never received a little swallow-tailed kite before. When they asked if I was interested in helping, I wanted to make sure that I could at least house it with other kites. So it ended up being raised with other Mississippi kites because it's really rare to get baby swallowtail kites in. but he was in excellent health when I got him. And my goal was then to start getting him to eat on his own, start flying around with the other birds and socializing with the other birds.
And what was the
And then
first thing that
eventually
you had to
transferred
do?
it to Miss Jennifer.
Jennifer, let's come to you. You had it last. What was the next stage for you?
Well, my concern was to get it back with other swallowtail kites. And since we were doing studies and monitoring nests and roost sites, we were trying to decide what would be the, absolute best chance for this bird to have a good start in life. And so first thing we did was try to find where the bird originally came from so that maybe we could even get it back with its family group. And so Dr. Mark Mitchell quickly provided the records. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get in touch with the source. Like the number there was a problem. Anyway, we weren't able to get in touch with the source, could not find the exact location. And so at that point, I decided we were working with some private landowners on an American Bird Conservancy and international paper collaboration, some working forests that or timberlands that were on the Pearl River Basin that had a really large group of kites, but it also had a late nest with 2 young that were just about ready to fledge. And we knew of a reliable roost right there. So it was isolated, it wasn't going to get into trouble finding people or anything like that. And so we talked to the landowners and they were thrilled. They were really excited about, being able to contribute and their land being of value. So when Letitia brought it to me, the bird was in really good health. I mean, she had really beefed the bird up, gotten him fattened up there, but it really didn't have flying experience yet. And since I'm a falconer, my husband and I decided that we're going to do some conditioning training, which we've done with plenty of other swallowtail kites before too. They have really long wings. And so they're not a bird that it's really easy to fly around in a chamber unless you've got something really large. And even then, their feathers break easily. So we conditioned it and then we're able to release it on July 3rd. Or July 4th. Yeah, somewhere right around there.
How similar? They're very similar to Mississippi kites, aren't they? But is the Mississippi kite very common in Louisiana, but the swallowtail is extremely rare?
The Mississippi kite is very common. Some springs I get upwards of 45, 50 babies during the spring. It just depends on what's going on with the weather. Usually during hurricanes and things, we get more. But the swallowtail kites, from what I understand, are very rare. I knew Jennifer because I had noticed a swallowtail kite one time, and I called her up because I knew she was doing a study, and I said, "You don't know me, but I'm riding along the levee, and there's a swallowtail kite, and I know you want us to report them every time we see them." So that's how I ended up finding Jennifer. And when I knew about this little kite, I was real excited because I know how rare they are. So I'll let Jennifer tell you how rare and what the study is about.
So the swallowtail kite and the Mississippi kite, even though they're both kites, they actually aren't very closely related, but they are sort of, convergent evolution. They serve similar functions in the world and have similar lifestyles. And so they often do feed and roost together, and they'll often nest very close by. So there is an association there. And Letitia's absolutely right. The Mississippi kite is expanding its range, and it's doing quite well. On the other hand, the swallowtail kites population really crashed around 1880 to 1940 and had a dramatic population reduction and range reduction. I mean, they used to extend all the way to Minnesota, so they're not doing very well, but they probably have experienced a modest recovery recently.
Well, that's fantastic. Dr. Mitchell, if I can come back to you, how was the bird presented and how did you have to restrain it? Was it a question of hooding it or using anesthesia or sedation to carry out an examination?
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and to comment on what everyone else has said, the Mississippi kite's the second most common bird that we see at the Wildlife Hospital. The barred owl is the most common, and the eagle is the third most common. So we see quite a few of these, and this is only the second swallow-tailed kite that I could find in our records going back about 20 years. When I got back to the ward, everybody had said, one of the other doctors had taken the bird in. They said, "Well, we have this strange-looking Mississippi kite." And when I opened the door, I said, "That's not a Mississippi kite." And I said, "That's just a swallow-tailed kite." And I've only seen an adult swallow-tailed kite because the juveniles are the adults are really quite beautiful. The juveniles, they're kind of like a little bit of an ugly duckling, but we know they're going to get there. And so this bird, when it came to us, now it did have maggots and some other things on it, but it certainly didn't have the adult plumage, which makes them one of the really gorgeous birds we have in North America. But in this particular bird, being a young bird, we are able to just use manual restraint to work with it. We don't have to be, overly aggressive. A lot of these nestlings seem to adapt. Of course, we don't want to imprint them as well. And so you may have seen some of the video where we didn't have a swallow-tailed kite mask, but we certainly have a Mississippi kite mask that we use to try to kind of take away the human appearance. So we use that, and the bird was actually really quite a good patient for us. And beyond basically doing the fluid therapy and getting rid of the maggots, for example, and just getting calories back into this bird, that's really what it needed. It had been out of its nest long enough. And again, a few more days probably would not have been recoverable. So really fortunate that people got it to us as quickly as they did. And that's really common here. One of the things we're really excited and proud of our citizens is that these animals are being presented. We had 1,300 cases last year. 95% of them are coming from concerned citizens in Louisiana, and the other 5% is primarily coming from wildlife and fishery agents, either federal or state. So,
fantastic. A question now for both Letitia and Jennifer. Did you have to continue using the mask at all times with the kite?
I would absolutely love to have the mask that Dr. Mitchell and his students make. It looks like they're paper mache. I would like to find out who does them. What I use is a hunting mask that hunters use when they're out in, it's a camouflage, see-through mesh. And so when I'm feeding the babies, same reason I don't want them imprinting on humans, I wear this see-through mesh mask, and they don't get to see my face. I don't allow them to hear my voice other than ambient, like if they might hear me in the background because they might be in my rehab room. And then once they move outside and I'm seeing them eating on their own, then I don't wear the mask as much, but they don't really imprint on you once they're eating on their own. They're just kind of like, oh, she's bringing food. And he learned to eat food from a couple older Mississippi kites that I use as foster parents.
A lot of people might be watching this, young people particularly, thinking, I want a career with wildlife. I want to get away from people, and I just want to work with animals. How collaborative was this rescue and rehabilitation?
I think it was one of the most collaborative efforts I've been a part of. Yeah. And I really like the fact that it brought together different types of expertise. And to me, the wildlife, you never know what situation you're going to find an animal in. And so you may need, veterinarian, a rehabilitator, but you also may need a tree climber. You may need to have a collaboration with a power company because they've got a bucket truck and can put the baby back in the nest, or you need somebody who is a good volunteer who can be in the field and assess the situation and say, oh, I can fix this right now. Or as Letitia was mentioning, a lot of these birds that are, maybe they're on the ground, but it's a fledgling and the parents are right there, and taking it away is the worst thing you could do. So having experts at every level and recognizing when you're like, oh, this is like finding the right release site. I think that's really the reason Letitia reached out to me. And I was like, well, yeah, I can do that. That I can do. I've got all these kite nests we're monitoring. So make that effort. And sometimes the bird shouldn't even be released in the state where it was found because of migration or temperature or something. So you may need to collaborate with other states. You may need to collaborate with an airline. You may need to get, like I've gotten permits from different states, all that kind of stuff. Don't be too inward. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And some people feel like they just need to know it all. Well, you need to recognize when you don't know it all and do right by the animal.
Yeah, this was a very unique situation for this one little bird. And like she said, I couldn't tell you where other kites were going to be to release this little guy. Whereas I can release Mississippi kites pretty much anywhere and know that they're going to find other Mississippi kites. So it was very important in this situation to get with Jennifer because I knew she was doing a study on them. But like you said, some birds, sometimes we have to collaborate with the federal government, with federal wildlife agencies so that we can transfer them across state lines and get them to the proper authorities or get them to the right location. I think I remember one year after Hurricane, wildlife and the federal wildlife and fisheries picked up a bunch of juvenile Mississippi kites and flew them to a rehabilitation facility in South America so that they didn't miss migration. Now, the budget isn't like that anymore. That's why I'm wintering over a few Mississippi kites until spring. But that year they're like, oh, no, we're sending a jet, meet us at the airport. They picked up a bunch of kites and took them to South America to a rehab facility down there. And as far as being around just animals and not wanting to deal with humans, unfortunately, I wish that were the case, but we have to deal with humans on a daily basis. Usually, sometimes I'll get upwards of 10 phone calls a day. I know Dr. Mark gets more than that because it's actually at his at the LSU Veterinary School. Sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're mean. You have to learn to have a thick skin sometimes. Sometimes people expect you to teleport to their location and pick up the animal for them because they don't feel it's their place to pick them up. A lot of times I can sweet talk them into rescuing them and bringing them either to LSU if they're closer or to me. A lot of times with fledglings or babies, I can get them to reunite the babies up in the tree with the parents. They feel like they have to do something to help. And so I just have them put the fledgling in a crate and stick it up in the tree. And then I tell them now, just be prepared. That baby might come right back out of that tree because that's what it's supposed to do at its age. But I mean, I wish we could be all like Dr. Dolittle and wall ourselves in and only have to deal with the injured animals. But unfortunately, that's not the situation. We have to deal with the human aspect of it too. And education, it's important to educate the public on why we do the things we do. A lot of people, like you said, will say, let nature take its course. To me, that's kind of a sad situation because I know in my heart that I would rather help an animal pass over by euthanasia than allow it to suffer, because a lot of times it's a human impact. They've either been hit by a car, they've been gunshot, or they've been poisoned, or something a human has usually caused the injury to this animal. And to allow them to suffer, it breaks my heart when I can't get to an animal or they tell me it ran back into the woods, because I know it's going to be a long suffering process for that animal. So I'd rather take the step and do what I have to assist the animal to pass humanely than to allow it to suffer. But a lot of emotional aspect to rehabilitation. It's not all fluffy, sweet, loving, cute. You know, sometimes we get them in and we have to make hard decisions. And Dr. Mark, I'm sure with being a veterinarian, you want to do everything you can to help an animal. Sometimes you do the help and then you realize that this bird is no longer going to be back into the wild. So then you have to make another call and say, even though I've done all this surgery on it, I've done all of this work on it, this animal's not going to be releasable. It doesn't make a good candidate for an education program. The most humane thing to do would be to end its suffering, because technically this bird is a wild bird. It's not a pet. It doesn't want to be captive the rest of its life. If the cage were open, it would wander off into the woods and just die. It's not like it's, oh, this human's feeding me and caring for me. It's just like, okay, this is where I get my food and they're not hurting me, so I'll accept that. But the minute you turn your back, I'm gonna leave and do my own thing. So that makes any sense.
And I'll echo what my teammates have both said. To what Jennifer said, there, depending on the estimates, there's between 12 and 18,000 species of birds, based on how people want to categorize them. No one can be an expert on 12 to 18,000. In human medicine, they have a hard time being experts on one species. So you can imagine the challenge. And then to go to the communication side, a lot of times people say, I want to be a veterinarian because I love animals, and I don't want to talk with people. But if you've spent, an appointment with a veterinarian, an appointment with an MD, you'll notice that the veterinarian has to do a lot more talking and a lot more communication to be successful. And it's really important for us to be patient. As Letitia said, there's going to be folks who have expectations. All of this is done volunteer. In some countries, in a number of countries, actually, all this rehabilitation, there is funding provided to do that. In the U.S., there's not state or federal monies. This is all being done volunteer based. Letitia has to fundraise everything as a private individual. We have a little bit more of a luxury because I'm at least at a university, so I have something to tie my name to, but we still have to do the same thing. So, every time something comes in, we try to let people know, we don't have the capacity to transport and do those things. As we've talked about, this is all done by volunteerism, but I like to reinforce to our students, this is where the greatness of humanity is. There is no other species. There is commensalism and mutualism where species kind of work together to make sure that they survive. But humans have the capacity to basically put themselves in harm's way to help, take care of something. We have 3 bald eagles in the hospital right now. They do not want to politely and respectfully allow you to do your exams and medicate them and do your surgery. And so we put ourselves, at risk when we do these types of things. And I think this shows what the real potential of the human being is, to be able to help and take care of those other species. It goes with what Gandhi had talked about. If you want to know what's happening with the society, see how they treat their animals. And so the communication becomes very, very important for us when we're working with society, with biologists, and then even like a set of teammates like this. But this couldn't have gone off any better than this. And it was amazing to me to be able to share Letitia's videos and Jennifer's videos back with the veterinary students and the other doctors, and they were just so impressed and really reinforced how important we as a group have to work as a team to be able to provide success, even for this one swallow-tailed kite. And as Jennifer mentioned, there aren't a lot of swallow-tailed kites, so they're really important to get out there.
There's one major aspect of this that we haven't covered yet. Can you tell us more about the transmitter that was used? And Jennifer, was the process of release what they call a hard release or a soft release, or was it something else?
Okay, the transmitter is a GSM GPS transmitter. So it works off of cell phone technology, the towers, and it only will work when the bird flies within range of the cell tower and is talking to, downloading data or uploading data rather at that time. So right now we're not receiving data on the bird, but that's expected. We wanted to have a transmitter on it because, I wasn't sure that it was going to be accepted by the group and didn't know if it would get in trouble, if it would really go off and feed for itself. And we could tell right away that it was. So it was a fail safe for if it wasn't doing well, that we could recapture it possibly. But also, this is a newer technology and it's lighter. It's a little transmitter like this. It's a remote, we're getting the data remotely. And this would be the first time we've ever put a transmitter on a bird this age. We've only put them on adults before because the transmitters we had were larger. We wanted a bird with a bigger wingspan, heavier weight, and also very expensive technology. Young birds have a lower survival rate. So do you want to really risk $4,200 on a bird that may not make it? But these are less expensive transmitters. And I want to give a shout out to American Bird Conservancy and International Paper and Avian Research and Conservation Institute, my colleagues, because they were all like, yes, let's do it. Because, we didn't plan to have a young kite to tag, but I think, if this bird makes it, we'll get some really groundbreaking information out of what birds do in those first 2 years of life. And we may even learn things like, what is their age at first breeding? Because we don't even know that now. We know it's not age 1 or age 2 from some other technologies that we've used before. So Letitia had asked me before, where is the bird now? The last record we got from her was, I think, October 9th, and she was in Honduras. And you might be worried about, well, wait a minute now. Yeah, because swallow-tailed kites migrate all the way down to southern Brazil. So is that okay? Well, it makes me nervous because I want to know where she is at every minute of the day. But it's okay, because it tends to be that when you get down there, there are fewer cell phone towers, and the kites are usually in very remote areas. So we're hoping that, in the spring, we'll get some really good news that she's alive and well.
And I was excited about this because as a rehabilitator, I can release birds and then I just hope that they have survived and moved on. Now, a few that I've released on my own property, they have proven to be little beggar mites, and they come back every day for the nice woman who walks around with the bowl of mice to get a free meal. So I know they're doing good because they also bring me presents and, have dropped bird feathers on me or half-eaten snakes or half-eaten crawfish on top of me. But this little guy was like, well, this is going to be really cool because, like you said, most birds don't survive their first year. So when she was sending me updates on tracking, I thought that was amazing. And I think there was a birder who also went and found her according to her tracking device and informed everyone that she had been roosting with some Mississippi kites. So I took a little blame for that. But I was like, but it's really cool to see that, this bird is thriving. At least it was thriving while it was, in our area and we could track her. So it'd be cool if we could put tracking devices on all the birds and see what happens. But unfortunately, we just hope and pray for the best. And this one's kind of cool that we're going to get so much data off of this one little guy. Little girl, I think she came out to be a female. So.
Yeah, so she was, after we released her, she spent some time at the release site and started, moving around a little bit more each day. And then, like, within a few days, she was really moving around like a kite that had, was 10 years old or something. And then she took a jaunt and really went west in the United States and ended up on the Red River on the Texas-Oklahoma border. And I was watching her pattern, and we had a volunteer that the Avian Research and Conservation Institute knew in that area who's a good wildlife photographer. And I said, Lori, I wonder if you could go out there and look for this bird. So Lori Lawler went out there and she did find the bird. And don't worry, Letitia, about her roosting with Mississippi kites, because swallow-tailed kites do that all the time. You're good. But anyway, she was joking. But, the point is that the bird was really healthy. She got fantastic pictures of her. The place was covered in grasshoppers, and that's clearly why she was there, because she wanted to be there. She was fattening up for migration. And I could tell from her whole tracks that bird was in good shape. I mean, you can just tell a bird that's moving like that and going all the way down to Honduras is in really fit shape. So we gave her as good a chance as she could possibly have. So if she doesn't make it, things happen to birds all the time that are out of their control. But I hope she does.
Here are his tracks from the first day,
and there's been some studies that have suggested, especially a bird this size, if this bird maladapted, it wouldn't survive more than 2 to 3 weeks in the wild from starvation. So the fact that because of Jennifer and her team were able to track the bird out through at least October, and the bird made it to Honduras, this bird has adapted, and so that's really what we were after.
It would be hard to distinguish his tracks from that of an adult kite.
There are a lot of pressures on these animals. This is why it's so important for us to be paying close attention to what those are.
And
from
over
the
several
climate to
areas
other
of pine
anthropogenic
plantation.
influences.
In a surprising turn of events, the Silver Creek kid hightailed it cross-country to North Louisiana and is now hanging out near Faraday.
Poaching, etc.
We hope that he is long-lived
it's really
and
important
teaches us much about the early years of a kite's development.
Can have the success that we're hoping
that they can have. It took substantial teamwork to rescue, rehabilitate, and release this young kite. So Orleans Audubon Society would like to acknowledge our partners,
especially the kites
of those not yet mentioned, Gina Kent and Ken Meyer of the Avian Research and Conservation Institute.
These birds come
provided
back and
logistical support for the tracking device, and the state agencies helped us with the necessary
people who are building
permits.
Subdivisions and
Thanks,
contractors, they don't think about that. Their goal is to knock everything down and put in as many houses as they can possibly do. So now people are telling me they're seeing more and more of these birds in older subdivisions. And it's because their land has been decimated. Their trees that they're roosted in normally are gone. Entire new subdivisions have been built in. And instead of leaving old tree breaks or tree lines or even old oak trees or old pine trees, they're clear cutting everything and coming back in with ornamental trees and flower gardens, thinking it's aesthetically pleasing, but it's also doing a large detriment to our wildlife, especially our migratory birds, because not just the kite species, but owls will nest in old trees that have hollows in them. Great horned owls have a territory of about 30 miles. But other birds, the smaller they get, their territory is smaller and smaller. And if you start clearing all the tree line, then they're kicked out of their territory. So it can see a death sentence for these animals. So.
This is absolutely fascinating. I could go on all night. Sadly, time is against us. Folks, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I'm kind of hoping that LSU does get its large wildlife raptor center that they're working on. Not only for the fact that they can have volunteers or people who want to become wildlife rehabbers go and actually get their hands-on experience and training there, either as a volunteer or a docent. Veterinarians can go and get their training as to how to work with other wildlife. But also to kind of take some of the slack off of the few of us who are doing rehab. It's not a cheap thing to do. Sometimes I go through 50 mice a night and several thousand insects a night. And like Dr. Mitchell said, that's all volunteer. It either comes out of my grant raising or my getting donations or out of my back pocket. And if we can have an actual wildlife center at LSU, it would take he already takes a lot of the numbers off of me. I think he said he did over 1,300. I only did 300. 300 is a lot for one individual to do. And we're losing rehabilitators instead of gaining rehabilitators. So I'm hoping this might draw a little attention towards that so he can get the funding he needs to actually start a large center. Most states have a large center. Louisiana is not one of those. So it would be nice. I could take a vacation if I could start sending some of the birds over to Mark.
Dr. Mitchell.
I think it's really important. We are intimately tied to our environment. Our success as a species and our wildlife are very important. And we do a lot of research looking what's happening to these animals with diseases that are in animal populations, those that can be zoonotic and even those that can go back into animals from humans, like SARS-CoV-2, for example. We find those in deer populations as a result of our exposure to them. And it's really important. If we don't protect our environment, we're going to find ourselves in a lot of trouble right now. As we're filming this, California is under duress, especially outside of LA, as a result of how the environment's being treated and the impacts on the wildlife, the impacts on the humans. So it's really important that we recognize and go back to that idea. We as a species have a very special skill set. We can come and help these animals. We can protect our environment. And we all really need to come together to do that. And I echo again what Letitia had said. There are ways to be able to do that. Get out there, get educated, find those folks that need help in your community. They can be private individuals like Letitia. They can be a facility, more like our facility, where we need help because you got a lot of people doing a lot of work and they don't necessarily have a lot of time off, and burnout can be high. So the more that you can do to help these folks out, the better it will be.
I'd like to end with the release story on my end. So this was really, we took the baby out into the middle of the swamp had just put the transmitter on the night before so it could get used to it. And my volunteer, John Nelson, took the kite and gave it a great big toss into this slough that was lined with cypress trees, beautiful, right across from a roost of swallowtail kites. And the kite turned back and just went whoop, right into a cypress tree really close. And you're like, oh gosh, we didn't even see much of a flight, and it just sat there and preened and, sunned its feathers, spread its wings out to sun. And when a swallowtail kite spreads its wings out, it's really beautiful. But the roost of kites took flight and they flew overhead and circled around the kite. And they were calling, and it was, wow, they really noticed right away that another kite had joined the group. It was really magical.
Fantastic. Dr. Mitchell, you are the director of the Wildlife Hospital of Louisiana State University. Letitia, you are from the Acadiana Wildlife Education and Research Charity. And Jennifer, you are from the Orleans Audubon Society. Thank you all so much for being on the Practical Animal Channel.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you for having us.